Hello, I'm Henry Bonsu and this is Doubling Down, a new show where we tackle a topic that's blazing a trail on social media and beyond. You too can join the debate on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram by using the handle DoublingDownTV. Joining me today are the cultural critic Father Frank Gelly, the writer and commentator Lola Adeshoye, and the author and blogger Richard Phillips. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, since becoming President of the United States, Donald Trump has waged an America-first protectionist war against what he calls the globalist agenda. According to the Trump doctrine, multilateral deals involving several countries have damaged US interests. So he's pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, the Paris Climate Accord, and most recently the Iran nuclear deal, saying they must be renegotiated or abandoned altogether. Trump has also attacked the World Trade Organization and NATO, withdrawn US membership of UNESCO, and slashed the UN operating budget. Critics say his decision to move America's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is the final nail in the coffin for the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians, who say the US can no longer be regarded as an honest broker. But Trump supporters claim the prospect of an historic summit between the US and North Korea, let's see if it still happens, is proof that his doctrine of disrupting the globalist order is working. Some leaders, however, are saying enough is enough. While President Macron of France is urging Europe to save multilateralism, Iran's President Rouhani says he'll be conferring instead with what he pointedly called the world's two superpowers, Russia and China. What's clear is that globalism as we know it is being disrupted. The question is who stands to gain and who stands to lose from the new disorder. Well, let's see what the panel thinks. Frank, I'm going to start off with you. When you look at the way in which the globalist multilateralist order is being shaken up, do you think this is a good thing?
Well, I certainly want to resist the idea that globalism or globalization are forces for the good of people. Just because Trump is a disruptor, a breaker of rules, and a bad guy in my book, it doesn't mean that globalizations are forces for good. They are part of, they are an economic system, and financial system driven by an ideology which is basically a capitalist, a consumerist ideology, which fundamentally, we are back to bread and circuses of the ancient Romans.
Well, Trump is a capitalist, of course. He's a symbol of capitalism. You know, he's a consumerist. He's a guy who says, I'm a deal maker, and he wants to break the kind of deals that the globalists have loved so far. You know, so multilateral deals.
I have actually read the book, The Art of a Deal, which was ghostwritten for Trump by Tony Schwartz.
Yes.
And what's significant, I don't want to personalize this too much, but certainly the man is driven by an obsessive, neurotic, I would say psychotic thirst for power, for success and for fame. There are no elements of compassion, of empathy, or care for people.
But the question is, and I'm going to come to you, Lola, whether or not he's a narcissist, a neurotic, psychotic, whatever Frank thinks, is his approach to globalism, which some people have criticized, working? Is it going to work for poorer people, those who are not elites, those who don't get to go to Davos or the G7 or the G20? What do you think?
No, I think actually what Frank was talking about in terms of Trump's personality is actually quite important because Trump is using this sort of nationalist, protectionist ideology as a means to an end, and the means to the end being him gaining more power. He isn't doing it because he cares about American people, because he cares about poor people. He's doing it because he thinks it's what people want to hear. Well,
they certainly believe that he cares. Those steel workers were alongside him when he announced, you know, I'm going to put all these tariffs on China. They're cheering.
Yeah, the problem is that you know, it is an ideology, but it's also, the horse is already bolted. So you can't really roll back the forces of globalisation because they're actually quite long down the line. And I think that what's going to happen is Trump is going to create a lot more problems than he solves.
Richard, some people are pointing to Trump's unilateral, and he's the President of the United States, so he's got the choice to do this, move of the US Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in the teeth of opposition, as an example of just how far down this road he's prepared to go. Were you pleased by what he did? Did you say to yourself, well, actually, why should he listen to everybody else? It's up to him and Israel. Well, bilateral.
I think it was. I don't think it was a very sensible move. I don't think. I think it played into the hands of certain people.
Yeah.
I think it's. But as with everything else, it has changed the dynamics of the situation. And I think that the issue with Trump really is there any method in his madness, or is he just mad? I mean, really, that's how it seems to me. And my sense of it is that all the people around him, not so much around him, but other countries, the Macron and Mrs. Merkel and, the Chinese and the Russians and whomever, are all having to deal with this complete change
in
disruption. The way that the disruption.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably all thinking along the same lines, which is, look, we're having to deal with this reality. America is an amazingly powerful country. We simply can't ignore them. But, we're going to have to play this, give them much in some sort of way that enables us to get to the next stage when hopefully normality will return.
Well, the big question is what that next stage is. And you talk about America being a powerful country. I mean, if you look at the monitors in front of you, you can see this graphic from the World Bank, which tells us how the global economy is carved up. You can see the US there at 24%, China just under 15%, Japan 5.9%, and so on. You've got the whole of Africa and Latin America are tiny, between them not even 10%. Doesn't that system need to be shaken up, Lola?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is so contradictory, because all that's going to happen is that Trump is going to make America less relevant and make other countries stronger. So China, for example, and other emerging markets. I think Richard is right that leaders will say, well, how do we find a way around and hope for the best for when he's no longer in office. But his strategy is wrong as far as I'm concerned. And one of the reasons why is because technology is the driver of a lot of this. And there's nothing Trump can do to stop the force of technology. And he's promised something to the people that follow him, especially poorer people who found their lives disrupted by the loss of manufacturing, for example. He's promised them something that he literally cannot deliver. He just can't. And so what's going to happen is he will continue to go down this way. He will isolate America. He will probably lead America into quite a deep recession. And everybody else will find ways around. And the people who are smart, like China, will just find ways to increase their power.
Well, here's the extent to which Trump has disrupted business as usual. If you look at your monitors, I mean, here we go. I mean, it took a call from Taiwan's leader. The US president isn't meant to do that for fear of offending China, which believes Taiwan belongs to it. It pulled out of the TPP, which was one of Obama's signature foreign policy aims. Vowed to scrap NAFTA, that's being discussed at the moment with Mexico and Canada. Imposed the, quotes, Muslim travel ban. Fighting NATO over money. We saw the way he's pushing his weight around at the NATO summit in Brussels. Pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. Painstaking negotiation. Takes years to get to this level. Threatened that nuclear war with North Korea. Rocket Man, and repudiated the Iran nuclear deal. And then finally we see recognised Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Frank, this creates instability, which is why Macron and others are saying we can't allow this.
Trump is the most powerful man in the world. He's also the most dangerous man in the world. He's creating a climate. He pursues a strategic geopolitical agenda, which is aimed at dividing and rule, which has always been the maxim of empires. It's particularly true as far as the Middle East is concerned. He's aligning himself with the Saudi Wahhabi regime in Saudi Arabia, which has funded a lot of terrorism, and in order to target forces like Iran, like people who support the Palestinians and the like. And all this song and dance about Iran in violation of two UN resolution. Israel is in violation of 83
Let me get quickly to Richard. What do you think about the way in which Trump is realigning America's alliances in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, the Middle East is it seems to me there's a sort of Gordian knot here that, I mean, if ever there were a case of my enemy's enemy being my friend, I mean, you have the supposed, sort of alliance now between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I mean, if that were ever the case, you can see it there. But it's such a mess. I mean, you know, the alliance, you know, Turkey and Russia and Iran on one side in Syria and Saudi Arabia against Qatar and the mess in the Yemen, you know, I mean, it's impossible
Trump
to understand.
Is he making things worse in the Middle East?
Look, I'm certainly no supporter of Donald Trump, but I'm not sure. In a certain way, we don't know. What this is certainly going to do is going to make everybody have to rethink the way they're functioning and how they're going to operate for the next, at least for the next couple of years. And that, to me, is the issue.
We've seen the blood of Palestinians,
yeah, but,
Richard. And we've seen Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner say it was a glorious day when 58 Palestinians
yeah, but actually, I don't think it was them. It was actually Netanyahu who said it. But I don't agree with
all right, let me stop you for a minute. I know you want to get it in, and I'll come to you in a moment or two. But we want to kind of broaden the discussion now because Jacques Relan is going to join us. He's a senior research fellow of the London-based Global Policy Institute. He joins us via Skype from France. Bonsoir, Jacques.
Bonsoir, Henri.
Jacques, when you see the likes of President Macron of France and Juncker of the European Commission saying it's time for Europe to step up, what do you think they mean? Is Europe really in a position to lead?
Europe is not in a position to lead. Europe has always had a very childish, dependent relationship with the US. The economic and defense security of Europe depended on the transatlantic alliance. It was that bedrock. And now it already felt at the time of George Bush, some people thought it was about time that maybe Europe become a bit more emancipated and started talking about European defense, European security. And now we are in a situation with Trump, which is even worse than at the time of Bush, in a dangerous world. We have now at the head of America somebody who's completely unpredictable, unreliable, and untrustworthy. And it's very difficult in this world which has now gone from bipolar to unipolar, now to multipolar. This multipolar world can be very conflictual with big changes in economic power. We see emerging powers now will represent soon 50% of the GDP, while the Western powers will soon fall from 50% of GDP to 20% of the GDP. So if the West wants to maintain a certain cohesion about the values, it needs to rely on multilateralism. That's what is considered very important. That's what Macron went to tell.
But when it comes to multilateralism, Jacques, I'll take advantage of the pause there. That's what Trump is fighting against. So how do the likes of Macron, Juncker, those globalists who are concerned about the realignment, how do they fight back? Do they try to get closer to President Xi of China or even to Putin of Russia? Or perhaps realign themselves with some of the powerful African countries or India or Latin American countries who themselves want a seat at the top table?
I don't think that Europe can think of allying with any other big trading blocs such as China or who has its own interests and very different from those of, and values which are completely different from those of Europe. Vladimir Putin is obviously intent on trying to bring down the European Union, so you can't ally with him. It remains, in spite of the differences that France and Europe have at the moment with America. America is the closest country, has been the oldest and closest ally of the European Union for a long time, is the bedrock of European security, and we won't change that overnight. The problem is that Europe has depended too much on America, and now is the final warning. It's about time that Europe takes its destiny in its own hand, defends its interest much more vigorously than before, and for that it means unity and a clear vision of the future of Europe. If Europe doesn't want to be a pawn in the global game, the multipolar game being played. If it wants to be a player, it has to make great progress in the field of defense. And that's why I would advise my British friends to maybe consider European security as a matter of urgency for them as well as for Europe. And it is also important that we challenge America's right to judge the behavior, the economic behavior of other countries, the extraterritoriality of the judgment of the Europe, of the US, which can impose fines in billions to French, Swiss, and British banks, is unthinkable. So now the Europeans are talking about some kind of response, but it will not be easy to come up with a response so quickly. Europe has 3 months, apparently European firms have 3 months in which they have to unwind or change the terms of trade with that. But at the end...
Jacques, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Jacques Relong from the Global Policy Institute. What I want to ask you guys, I'm going to ask you, Richard, is you've got the US on one side, you've got Europe on the other side, and of course China watching closely. But could other countries that haven't been at the top table over the last number of decades, that are watching closely, like India, for example, some of the African countries like South Africa, Latin American countries like Brazil, take advantage of this and say, actually, now's our time to ask for, demand what we want?
Well, I don't know, but I do know that everybody will be trying to take advantage of it. The idea that everybody's going to be thinking about sort of, you know, the global benefit is nonsense. Mm-hmm. You know, I think if you look at it from a kind of, I don't know how to put this, a Kissingerian point of view.
As in Henry Kissinger.
Yeah,
yes.
I think what you're going to think is, you know, quote Palmerston, we have no permanent friends, we have no permanent enemies, we've only got permanent interests. Mm-hmm. And I think that is fundamentally the rule for all countries. And they'll all be looking, how can we use this situation to advance our own particular interests, and that will come first. I'm quite sure the Chinese are looking at it like this. I'm quite sure the Russians are looking at it like this, and that is inevitably the way that everybody is going to think. Right. Now, in terms, obviously, global security is, you know, in national self-interest as well. So that will be part of it. But if you look at the situation, for instance, with North Korea, goodness knows where that's going to go, because now we don't even know it's going to happen. Yeah. But if you look at the situation with North Korea, I personally, without any knowledge of the subject directly, my guess is the Chinese have lent on the North Koreans because they don't want a gigantic mess in North Korea. Mm-hmm. And I think they're looking at Trump and thinking, OK, we're going to have to eat this for a while, and we will, and then we'll somehow strategically position ourselves to take
everyone's acting in narrow self-interest.
That's exactly what I think.
Lola, does that trouble you?
Well, I mean, the question, this whole discussion is about globalisation, but I think the real question is it the sort of end of the West? Yeah. And in some ways, I think it could be, yeah. And I think that's why what Trump is doing is very amusing to some degree and very foolish. Yes. Because America doesn't exist independently of the rest of the West, and he's trying to act as if it does. Mm-hmm. And what he's doing is he's underestimating the interests and also the desire that other places like China have in furthering their interests too. And so that's what I think is really the thing is, will this be the demise of the West? I think potentially it could be, yeah. All
right, thank you very much. Frank, you can come in a bit later on. But this discussion has really got you going, and Facebook reflects that. So here's what you've been saying, and we'll start off with this message from John Hannes, who says, globalism has been going strong since 1492. It's not going to stop anytime soon. Trump and even the mighty economy of the US can't stop it. The most Trump can do is isolate America in a backwards cocoon as the world marches forward. Not saying globalism is good or bad, just saying it's inevitable. Portland Oiloff says, I disagree. I believe globalism is in full swing. It just isn't the kind you're used to. And some of you have been tweeting. We'll start off with this from Wesley, who says, globalism doesn't help people living in first world nations. That's intriguing. We have another one from Hireth, who says, 50 years, 1968 to 2018. Time for a paradigm shift. Beginning and end of an era. Postmodernism with globalism, consumerism, destruction of nuclear families and values, criminals as victims, white guilt, political censorship, etc. Finally, this era is going to its grave. Hashtag ride the tiger. And then finally this from Brian Krasenstein. Brian says, Trump is now threatening European allies with sanctions if they stay in the Iran deal. Meanwhile, he's promising to prop up ZTE, a Chinese company. It appears as if the United States is aligning our interests with Russia, China, North Korea, rather than Europe or Canada. And if you would like to get in touch, you can do so by using any of our social media platforms. I'm just wondering whether you agreed with any of those, Frank. Particularly about that realignment at the end.
I believe that politics comes before economics. The professor earlier on mentioned Europe being subservient to the United States. He forgot that General de Gaulle actually pulled down on NATO. General de Gaulle was trying to represent a European force which was actually had its own independence. And we need in Europe not a Macron, this pipsqueak corporate and managerial jumped up character. No him. We need a real leader, another General de Gaulle who takes Europe really to face up and confront the hegemony of the United States, the evil hegemony which is trying to shape up the world into some sort of Frankenstein monster.
So, so you don't agree that it's the shining light on the hill, the land of the free and the home of the brave? Don't answer.
That's American exceptionalism.
It was
American exceptionalism, which I reject.
It was a rhetorical question. Let's see what people have been saying. They've been leaving voice notes on our Facebook page. Let's listen to a couple.
I am Ricky from Crawley. Because Trump doesn't know his history, he doesn't understand that the globalist order he attacks is the same one that stopped us from having a third world war.
Hello, this is Sammy calling from London. Like it or hate it, Trump is a deal maker, and he gets results. Look at the US economy. Look at NATO and North Korea.
Well, two diametrically opposed positions there, and we've got a lot of division on this panel. Whether you like it or not, if it's a madman strategy or it's something else, it's getting results, as we're hearing there, Lola.
What results?
Well, the economy's booming, the job figures out this week.
The economy booming has nothing to do with Trump. So if you look at what's been happening, what Trump is doing is he's undoing, policy-wise, he's undoing all of Obama's good work. And economically, he's claiming credit for something that he did not create. So the economy has been booming basically since...
That's not entirely true. I'm sorry, but it is true. I mean, what he's done...
This is your closing thought, Richard, go on.
Well, I'm just saying that I think, you know, when you say that it's not entirely... I mean, you're right in the sense you're right in one sense.
He hasn't actually done anything.
Well, what they've done is the tax cuts in America, right, have been instrumental in causing the stock markets to rise in America.
Yes, but they've been... But it has been rising.
That may be the case, but it's one of the measures by which the economy is... I'm not arguing. I'm completely anti-Trump, but what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to deal with him, you have to deal with the reality of what actually has happened under him.
But people are giving him way too much credit,
well,
and that's what I think. That's what I think is the issue. He isn't a deal maker. He has not made any deals of any significance. Pretty much every policy position he's put in has been thrown out. The one thing he's done is the tax bill, which has not completely come into effect yet. The actual effects of that remain to be seen. The economy is booming. It has been growing before he came into office. Yep. Unemployment is going down. It has been going down before he came into office. It remains to be seen what Trump has done. But as somebody who has economically for himself been detrimental, I find it hard to understand how he's going to suddenly be excellent for a country when he himself can't even manage his own personal or professional finances.
We've done Mammon, let's do God in 10 seconds with Frank. Where's it all going to go? Give us some spiritual healing, please. You've got 10 seconds.
Well, ultimately, God's in charge. The question here is the medium of human beings. Yes. We are not automata, we're not robots, so we got to fight, we got to oppose the forces of darkness, and we have to double down, yes, and stand up for what is right.
Okay, so we're going to be multilateral people, not bilateral people in our relationships.
We must be anti-hegemony, anti-US hegemony.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's it for this week. Thanks very much to my studio guests, Frank Gelly, Lola Adeshoye, and Richard Phillips. Check out Doubling Down on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for news of next week's topic. And remember to get your views in early. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.